Hoy llegamos al capítulo 50. No puedo más que sentirme orgulloso del espacio que hemos creado en este país al sector de los escape room, no solo a nivel informativo, entretenimiento, sino también pedagógico y ayudar a visibilizar lo que se hace desde el terreno profesional y cuántas personas se dedican profesionalmente, valga la redundancia, a hacer disfrutar a los demás. Hoy es un día mágico porque tengo el placer de recibir a quien, para mí, es una de las personas que más sabe de escape rooms en el mundo. Con unas cuantas publicaciones científicas a sus espaldas y muchas horas de investigación, hoy nos visita en el podcast Scott Nicholson, profesor de diseño y desarrollo de juegos en la Universidad Wilfrid Laurier en Brantford, Ontario, Canadá, y director del laboratorio de juegos Brantford Game Network. El desarrollo de la entrevista será diferente al habitual, lo advierto. En esta ocasión, mi gran amigo Juan Alfonso Gil, sí, el de Torre Enigma, va a realizar la entrevista completa e íntegramente en inglés. En los próximos días, te prometo que la vamos a subir doblada al castellano, por si te da más pereza o no se te da nada bien el inglés, como a mí. Nada más, darte las gracias por todo este tiempo juntos y disfruta de la entrevista.
Welcome to La Clave Maestra, the space where we break down the secrets of immersive entertainment. Today we have an exceptional episode. This is our first 50th chapter, and we are celebrating it with a true luxury for any fan or professional in this sector, the escape room field. Joining us is one of the most influential minds in the study of escape rooms worldwide. He's a professor, author of various research works on escape rooms, game architect and puzzle creator for the Red Bull Escape Room World Championship. He's an expert in the science of entertainment and puzzles, and undoubtedly an essential reference to understand this phenomenon. Connecting from Canada, it is a great honor to welcome Scott Nicholson. Scott, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, hi there, and thank you for having me. So 50, huh?
Yeah.
So your podcast, just like me, is becoming an old man. So we're gonna sit around and in our rocking chairs, drink our coffee, and complain about the world. Is that what we're gonna do here?
Yeah, more likely. That's the plan. So there's a very famous video by Mark Rober that introduced me to your work. And I actually read something about you previously, but that was the moment I put you a face and a voice. It is probably one of the videos that has promoted this sector the most globally. Have you updated, Scott, any of the advice you gave back then with Mark Rober?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. Yeah, Mark reached out to me and wanted to do this video. It was midweek. It was, I think, a Wednesday, and he wanted to film the video on Friday.
Okay.
And so I let him know, well, all right, I can come up with something. So very quickly what I did, so he actually spent a full day in my game lab with me, and I created a series of stations with some of my students that took him through the escape room skills you needed, searching and puzzle solving and communication, and trying to just give him those key highlights. What's interesting is I'd say the biggest things that have changed in escape room design. Like one of the things I did is I took him to a room and I had 10 playing cards around the room, and I said, find the 10 playing cards. And we talked about the typical places escape rooms hide stuff. Look under the table, look behind the door you just came through. If there's a rug, pick it up until the game master yells at you and says, you don't need to move the rug. If there are pictures on the wall, take them off the wall until the game master yells at you and says, you don't need to remove the pictures.
Yeah, you have to be curious to the point to be paranoid, right?
But that's changed. In modern escape room design, the searching activities are in general lowered considerably. They're seen as really lazy design, to be honest. When you go into an escape room and they've just hidden stuff as a puzzle.
True.
That's not. It's kind of like making a room dark just because you want to make it harder.
Yeah.
Those are things. So I'd say that that's been one of the shifts is designers have realized that players are getting a little wiser to expecting more thought to go into the design, expecting their time to be spent on solving interesting puzzles, not looking for something. Having those searching elements, if you have them, they're usually very brief, maybe just, a searching activity now is best used as a way for the player to see what's in the room.
True.
That
I agree completely with that.
As that guide to say, I'm going to put, so if you're developing an escape room and you want to use a searching puzzle, put the pieces in places where you want the players to see, because you're going to need them to come back there later in the room. So it's like a coming attraction to say it's like a way to highlight certain areas of the room. That is a use for searching that makes it more clever, as compared to I'm just going to stick random things throughout the room because it's escape rooms are supposed to be about searching.
That's completely true. Yeah.
That focus, you still need to survey the room, but you don't need, because it used to be in the older rooms, you knew you were going to spend your first 15 minutes scouring every corner of the room. And maybe if you were really lucky, they give you a black light to look for invisible stuff written on the walls as well.
That's so 2015's escape room. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. In fact, I think that the number of red herrings have been decreasing a lot since those early years. And I think that now they are putting an effort as designers into making the room more attractive into the solving part of the game, and being more of an experience and not on a search and find, right?
Well, in general, the industry, what we are seeing with rooms is the goal of the rooms nowadays is you want to make the players feel smart.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than necessarily requiring them to be smart. Because we've realized that if a player feels smart and they come out of the room, even if they don't succeed the room, but they have moments where they feel smart, they're a lot more likely to put their money down and go and play the next room.
True.
Than if in the room they play it and the room has been designed to really make the players not feel very smart about themselves. Because I don't know if you remember early on, there was a lot of attitude in the industry of this being a situation of the designers versus the players.
True.
And Red Bull actually cast me in that role in the Escape Room World Championships. I was on the TV show that we did for it, and I was like the evil Dr. Nicholson who's created these dastardly challenges. And I think it's much better for escape room designers to think of themselves like a tabletop role-playing game master.
Oh, that's nice to hear, because I played myself RPG a lot. Yeah.
And so, in a well-run tabletop role-playing game, the game master is not going in and saying, I'm going to defeat those players. The game master is saying, I want to give those players a challenge that they can overcome.
True.
I want to give them interesting stories. I want to give them agency in those stories. I want to give them some choice. And so taking that model of being more of a tabletop role-playing game master when you are sitting down to design an escape room is going to create an escape room experience that the players will feel more engaged with, because they're going to have some agency around what's going on.
That's very interesting, because in fact here in Spain, I think that the win rate have been rising from 50% maybe average to 85 to 90% in the last 6 to 7 years. So it has a huge difference between the early years and the current times. So we are going to start with the block, with the first block that is called Origins and the Why of the Phenomenon. And for the first official question, I have to put it this way. Scott, you come from the academic world and board games. What did you see in the first escape room you made that made you think there's something more here, there's something interesting here? How did you end up becoming a global reference in escape rooms?
So the first room I played was in Singapore. Okay. I was there in 2014 giving some workshops for librarians, and because that was my previous world, I was in library science. I was a librarian and I taught in library schools, and I did research on games and libraries. And I had been to one of the many shopping malls in Singapore. Singapore is a lot of shopping malls. That's a big thing they do. And I saw these escape rooms, and I said, "Oh, I've never heard of these." And I asked them, "What are these things? Can I do it by myself?" Because I was there by myself, and the answer, "No, you can't." And so I brought it up at the event because I was talking about games and libraries, and I brought it up at the workshop. And a group of librarians got very excited and said, "Oh, well, we'll go do one." So we went to Chinatown there in Singapore, and we did a horrible escape room.
And still, you like it, or
well, no, but I saw potential.
You saw the potential. That's great.
The room was a very small room. I think they had 6 of us in this small room. There were posters on the walls and a series of boxes mounted on the wall, and each box had a lock on it. So you would get a clue. You'd go to a poster. You'd solve a math problem. That would give you a solution. You'd unlock the next box. You'd get a clue. You'd take it to a different poster. You'd solve the math problem related to the poster. There was one physical puzzle in the room, which was a display cabinet with a rope in it that you had to manipulate. Everything else was just a poster on the wall that you solved a puzzle from, and that opened the lock.
That's it. Okay.
So I know that for me, I look back and said that was an awful room. However, it unlocked my past life. So my past life before board games, and well, I've always been engaged with board games, but I've made games of many type, was through university. I was heavily involved in live action role playing. So during university, that is where I really started doing game design. So I got involved in a group called the International Fantasy Gaming Society, and we would dress up in costumes, take padded weapons, go out in the woods, and go through a day-long adventure.
Okay.
And during that adventure, there would be some story, there would be some puzzle solving, there would be some physical things, and there would be some combat. And during that time, I was designing these games, and many of the activities that I designed then are the exact same activities that happen in escape rooms today. So because you're creating traps and chambers and floor puzzles and locks, and all of these things were going on. That actually inspired me to write one of my papers about the histories of escape rooms, that it's not this linear thing, but that comes from everywhere. So LARPing, and my first published work was actually a Cthulhu Live. I was one of the authors of the Call of Cthulhu live action role-playing game. I know, it's on your shirt. So that's where it ties back to that. So I'd had a long history doing live action role playing. So when I saw the escape room, the first thing I thought was, hey, they've commercialized LARP. Okay. Because the thing about LARPing is it requires a lot of entry. You have to learn a system. You have to get a costume. You have to learn what's going on. However, there were games that were being run at conventions, and this was something I had done quite a few of, called con games or convention games, which would be a 1-hour LARP, which was designed with a very low expectation to entry. So it might be an index card of things you had to read to understand just the basics of the system. They were much more experiential. It was not designed to be developing these deep characters, but more of engaging with a story, doing some light puzzling, maybe some light combat, but in a 1-hour wrapped up experience. So I've been designing this structure of game since the 1990s, this 1 hour, come in the door, you don't know anything about it, you're going to play the game, you'll have the whole story experience done in an hour. So I saw escape rooms and I'm like, oh, all right, they've commercialized these con games. The idea being that you don't have to know a lot coming in. I think the biggest thing about escape rooms that makes them appealing to a wider variety of players compared to any other form of gaming is that you don't have to prepare ahead of time. True. If you want to be a video game player, you got to spend hundreds of dollars on a console. Or a PC that can handle it. You got to deal with all of that. You've got to learn how to manipulate something that has 20 different buttons on it. A controller. You have to, that is, if you've ever watched someone who's never played a video game with a controller and
you will need a learning curve, and
this is a heavy entrance requirement to understand how to play games, that because there's a lot of buttons on this thing that you're expecting someone to be able to do. And escape rooms, one of the goals is to reduce that to where you can learn in just a few minutes what you need to know, because there aren't as many and people talk about virtual games, and they talk about immersion in games as compared to VR. And I'm like, well, you're putting a fishbowl on your head. That's not that immersive as compared to I'm in a physical world. If I want to go to something, there's no barrier between me and the stuff. I am the avatar.
Yeah.
That's different from many other forms of game where you're representing an avatar. In escape rooms, you are the avatar.
Exactly.
So I saw that first escape room and I said, okay, number one, they've commercialized LARP. This is interesting. Number two, I'm an academic and I can now tie all of my 30 years of experience with LARP and bring that as a theoretical framework when I'm now able to talk about escape rooms very quickly. So that allowed me, because I'd already had decades of experience with live 1 hour interactive experiences. I'd also, since I've always have absorbed any reality or game TV show that has challenges or puzzles in it. I was doing that forever because I was just taking those ideas for LARPing type stuff. So, and then a history of tabletop role playing and then the board game space, because there's not as many connections to the board game space other than that it's in an analog, that face-to-face experience space. But I had all of that ready.
Mixed together. Yeah.
So,
Sure.
And then the other piece of it that got me engaged was recognizing the value of these in museums and libraries. Recognizing that having, because museums are already, I've done a lot of work with museums, and museums as being interactive spaces where you're working with physical stuff, bringing people together, that then I saw an escape room as being, hey, this would be an exciting thing to bring to museums. So we need to talk about it. And so that inspired me to, dealing with jet lag from Singapore, blearily eyed, I dug through and found every escape room I could find on the internet.
Okay.
That was that was either in English or that the translation tools would tell me was an escape room, and got a survey together and sent that survey to, and at that point it was 400.
Okay.
Sent that survey to the 400 escape rooms that I could find.
So worldwide, you're talking about worldwide, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was just what I could find using. Now I'm a former librarian. My PhD was on web search tools, so I was pretty strong in searching. I felt comfortable about doing this, and so sent the message out to those 400 escape rooms, and about half replied.
That's great. Okay.
Which is unheard of for a web-based over the transom survey that you're just sending out to get a 50% response rate. But I think what's that indicative of at that moment in the industry was the hunger for information.
Absolutely.
Because it was very, so I told people, and I got a lot of replies that said things like, I'd normally never tell people these things, but I see you're a professor. A lot of replies from people that knew me from, so I was the first YouTuber to talk about board games. I started a series called Board Games with Scott 20 years ago. I was a YouTuber 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's
See, we're old men in the rocking chair.
A veteran, yeah.
But a number of folks who started escape rooms came from the board gaming world and had seen my videos and replied and said, again, I'm answering this for you because
I recognize you. Yeah.
You did this other thing in board games. You didn't get any money for that. You're a professor. You don't have a number of folks said, you don't have an escape room. You're not doing this as a competitive thing.
Exactly.
You have no dog in this fight.
That was key to gain information and to have a good survey about everything that was going on back in time. Talking about this in your work, you always invite people to ask why. So I ask you, why have escape rooms connected so deeply with people all over the world? What psychological and social keys do they touch that other entertainment forms don't? I guess that you talk about the avatar, that you are the avatar. So what do you think it is the key for this to become something that has attracted so many different types of people?
So there's a number of things going on here. One is it's a cooperative game.
Okay.
So when you're going into an escape room, you're working together with people to beat the game. And that is an experience that we don't have in a lot of gaming. A lot of gaming is very competitive, that you're going against each other. And in this world, which is very competitive, I mean, our lives are very competitive. And so going into something that's cooperative, that we're going to work together. I think that's one thing that does get escape rooms engaging. Another thing is that you want a diverse group of people. It's not like, a basketball team where everyone needs to have a certain set of skills. Escape room teams are more successful when people are different. If everyone comes in and they're good at the same thing, then you're going to be challenged in some of the puzzles. So that's why you do an escape room with people that are very different from you, because then it's great to see the people you're with, to have people have a hero moment. I talk about in escape rooms that you want to create hero moments for different kinds of players, so that every player has that moment where they're the one that finds the thing. They're the one that cracks the code. They're the one that gets through the laser maze. They're the one that throws the thing. Everyone has that moment where they're the one that's the hero. The annoying thing is that when you have one person who wants to be the hero all the time.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It also, the fact that it's similar to karaoke in that the floor to entry, as we talked about earlier, is quite low. All you have to play an escape room, you just have to be able to afford it. And there's not a lot of other expectations. You haven't had to make a costume. You haven't had to read a big rule book. You haven't had to buy a game and prepare it. You haven't had to learn how to use a controller. You haven't had to do any of these things. You walk in and you can play the game. Kind of like karaoke. You don't have to organize a band. You don't have to rehearse. The band's ready. The words are in front of you.
You go for
Here's
it.
The stage, go. So I think it hits that similar thing of it's an activity that you can do. Also, I believe that the 1 hour time limit is attractive, because if you think about other forms of games, most games are actually very demanding of your time. In fact, in today's society, game design has been built around addiction design, because the games are fighting so much to trigger your brain chemicals in different ways that there are these addictive things that, every game you open up, how many hours of my life am I going to sink into this in order to play? And
Tell
I play
me about it.
Games. And so mobile games and video games are actually quite bad about that. But even board games with these models toward legacy games with secrets that you uncover, well, that's triggering your brain. They want you to come back, play it again, and trigger those brain chemistry. But there's something deeper going on here. So you asked about the theory. So we're going to dive into a theory. And this theory drives a lot of what I do in game design. I teach the theory in my courses, and it's called self-determination theory. And so self-determination theory by DC and Ryan is the concept is that we as human beings, we have three things that we need to have to feel good about ourselves. And if we can have these three things, we're going to feel good about what we're doing. We're going to feel good about ourselves. And if we don't have these things, then we don't feel so good about what we're doing. And those three things are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So we'll talk about each one and how escape rooms hit all three. So competence. The idea is that what you're doing, you are getting better at. You're having mastery over the thing you're doing. And escape rooms are fantastic for competence.
True.
Because you're doing stuff. You are seeing you get through the next puzzle after solving the puzzles in well-designed puzzles that have good ramping up experiences, or the game master providing hints. By the way, if you're always having to provide a hint for the puzzle, don't do that. Fix the puzzle. But anyway, competence. So you want the players to feel, and that's why I talked about that today's escape rooms are really focused on making the players feel smart, because that builds that sense of competence. Autonomy. You want to feel like you have some control about what you're doing. And that's the difference between, say, an escape room and a theme park ride. So a theme park ride, which you get on it and you go through and these things happen to you, you've got no control. There's no autonomy there. It's all happening to you. In escape rooms, you're the one driving it. You're the one that's in charge. Everything you do is because of you. So you have that autonomy to what's going on. And third, relatedness. We need to feel some connection to other people. And that's escape rooms requiring communication, requiring us to work together, and it creates that relatedness experience as part of the cooperative activity. So I believe theoretically, that's one of the reasons why escape rooms are strong. And I use this theory when I teach game design. So I'm a professor of game design, and I teach a lot about making educational games and learning games, corporate training games. That's a lot of what I do is I make games to teach people stuff. And I always use this self-determination theory in the game design. But escape rooms, by their very nature, have all three of these things built in a well-designed escape room.
That's quite interesting, Scott. So the first rooms were all about lock and keys and often included puzzles that felt forced and related to the theme. But now we are seeing experiences that are almost cinematic. So for you, what have been the biggest milestones or leaps in this evolution?
So a lot of people get really focused on the generations of escape rooms, lock and key versus things moving around versus all of that stuff. For me, I don't care. A game, if it makes sense that I'm opening a lock And it makes sense that the code is being presented in a logical way. There's a reason why that code is in the room. There's a reason why this is there. It's great. And this is that Ask Why article. The concept of the Ask Why article is because you're in a simulation. Escape rooms are simulations. They are games, but they're also simulations. And if that simulation makes sense,
it is authentic enough, right? Okay.
Right. It's authentic to the theme. There's, again, another theory, another game design theory is a concept called ludo-narrative dissonance. So ludo-narrative dissonance, ludo means game and narrative is story and dissonance is two things that don't work together. Ludo-narrative dissonance occurs when the thing you're being asked to do in the game doesn't make sense for the narrative that you've been provided for the game. So when you're in Egypt and you find a laser maze in a pyramid, that creates ludo-narrative dissonance.
Okay.
Or when you're in Egypt and you find a combination lock, again, ludo-narrative dissonance. But if you have a game that's set in Egypt and the concept is that the gods are there and you have a puzzle that you're unlocking with magical enchantments or a door that is opening with some large key or things like that, that makes sense. Well, then that's where that Ask Why is pushing us towards, to avoid ludo-narrative dissonance. On the other hand, if you are in a modern situation and you're trying to open a cash register by finding a key to open the drawer, great. That's a perfect. I shouldn't have to, come up with a series of numbers that I push on a cash register to open the drawer. If it's locked, I should find a key. So that's the problem that goes the other way. It's people, because they want to use a fancy technology. They want to use, you have to put things on the scales that measure exactly the same. And when you do that, the cash register drawer opens. In what world does that exist? That's what annoys me about escape rooms now.
It remembers me. It's like some horror theme movies that happen something that it makes no sense, but it is only for the purpose of the narrative, right? Or they are forcing something to happen to the protagonist, and they want something strange to happen, so they make some absurd things, right? So thank you so much for explaining this concept, because you just answered another of my questions in advance. So that was great. Ludo, did you say, can you repeat the name of the concept?
The theory, ludo-narrative
dissonance.
And so that it actually comes out of video game studies, because there's many video games like Zelda. You are Link. You are the hero of this village. What are you going to do? I'm going to smash everyone's pot and take everything they have. And then I'm going to save the village. So, I mean,
that's a good example.
That's ludo-narrative dissonance. It's like, I'm the good guy. Wait, let me steal everything from
the village.
Yes. And then I'm going to save the village after I have destroyed the pottery in these little farmhouses. What do you have? Well, I only have the grain that I grow. Okay, I'm going to smash all of your pottery and take the 4 coins that you have in that pottery.
You have saved for your lives. Okay, so now we are moving into the last question of this blog. That is that many professionals in the sector, myself included, believe that escape rooms are here to stay. So what do you think needs to happen for this to be a long-lasting sector?
So I've heard some theories saying that the number of escape rooms in a city could be aligned with the number of movie theaters in a city. And I think that's actually a pretty reasonable concept, as it's something that's, so there's a couple paths. I've given a talk on the long tail of escape rooms. So the long tail is the idea of what are those things that are going to be lasting over time. So we have a few long tails that I believe have come up. One long tail is the luxury experience. I had the opportunity to go up to Montreal and Quebec City and play a lot of the top ranked games in the world there, paying over $100 for each escape room. And the escape rooms had $1 million sets. There was a whole community of them up there because it became a vacation experience. So people travel to this area to spend a number of days and are wealthy enough to be able to pay this much money to play all of these games. And so that's one long tail, is that luxury experience, but there can't be too many of those. Those are, that's the problem with that is those will be few and far between. But one of the other long tails, I believe it's out there, is tourism. So escape rooms have two different approaches based on the place where they're set up. Escape rooms in a non-tourist heavy city have a challenge in that once the players who live in that area have played the game, they've gone through their player base, and now they need to change the game in order to bring that player base back. So in many cases, that's a challenge, and escape rooms then have to think about other things they could incorporate, whether it be a board game cafe, other activities, trivia nights, other things like that to bring people back beyond the escape rooms. And so in a tourist heavy area, then the people change rather than games having to change. So cities that have set up in an area with a lot of tourism have an advantage in that they continue to get new people. In the tourism industry, one of the spaces that is not being served well enough by escape rooms, and I believe is an open market, are family-friendly, historically based escape rooms in high tourism areas. So games where I go on a cruise, I cruise quite a bit. And I've thought, if I really was entrepreneurial, I would set up I would partner with a cruise line to set up a series of escape rooms in the ports they visit, to where you get a punch card or it tells a continuing narrative of the pirates that sailed the Caribbean seas. And each
great idea.
Each game is different, but you can buy them as a package because you go, especially if they're family friendly. That's another miss, I think. Escape rooms, not enough escape rooms have become family friendly, are able to have, because a family based cooperative activity that allows a variety of people to succeed is not something there's a lot of out there.
True.
A lot of family activities are really designed more for the kids. And so when I've worked with museums, I always have to make escape rooms that are family friendly, that have activities that kids can do, activities that grownups can do. It's a different style of design, but that's an untapped market, the family friendly escape room. And then to make it interesting, don't make zombies, don't make vampires, make it about the place where you are. Because what is a story that is unique? A unique story to an escape room will be based on the local history. And then you tie that into a partnership with a local history museum. So the idea is that you partner up with local, it could be a local history museum, whatever. I've made games with art museums, things like that. The idea being that the museum then promotes the escape room. The escape room has activities that promote the museum. It's designed for families who want to do an activity together. So you've just done this historical museum. You're like, hey, you want to learn more about this? Here's an escape room designed for you and your family to play that you can now have a deeper experience around this historical thing. So I see historical tourism, family-friendly rooms as being a long tail room because it's not just dependent upon the escape room entertainment industry. In fact, it's tied into a different industry, the sort of living history, historical museum, historical reenactment. That tourism space is quite popular. And then the third space that I believe has long tail is aligning games that can be used for nonprofit and corporate training and team building activities.
Okay. See, for companies and things like that.
Right.
Okay.
So, and I've talked to a number of escape rooms that make most of their money through during the day, having them set up as corporate training type activities. And so again, the rooms are designed differently. You need to have spaces for that debriefing, a debriefing process. You need to think about how does this game explore different, and you could have games centered on different kinds of team building things, concepts, a game really around communication, a game around ethics, a game around the common corporate and nonprofit team building stuff. They will pay, you can basically, this is what I found for designing games for training, which is another thing I do, is I can add 1 or 2 zeros to the end of the cost of whatever when I'm using it for corporate nonprofit training. So, that escape room, that board game that might cost $50 on the shelf, if I sell it as a corporate training game, I can charge $500 for it. So I've seen companies that will make their money by having their escape rooms open during the day with a focus on the corporate groups, and then at night they'll have it open as a recreational activity without the debriefing and those sorts of things. really that's not making a lot of money with that, but that's marketing for then people to go back to their companies and say, hey, I did this room. It was really interesting. Because if then the clever bit is you say, okay, you've played our room. If you work at an organization that would like to use this room as a team building activity, talk to them, bring them back. And when you come back, we'll have a special viewing area for you to be able to watch your team play the game, because they've played the game. So it's been ruined for them, but giving them a different role. So there's something they can do so they can watch what's going on.
So they can come back. Yeah.
Right. And so because that's a challenge, is many escape rooms are once and done type activities. That's a bit of the golden grail of design, are games that can be played multiple times. But something where that person you're sending away to say, hey, you can come back and you will be able to be in this role and watch what's going on. Or even I've played a few games where there was a really smart game where one player was separated from the group. That player went into a control booth for the rest of the game and had ways to interfere with the team.
With the team itself, okay.
Who had just sent this player away. And that player could then make the rest of the team's life more difficult for the rest of the game. So
yeah. So like the early years of the escape rooms, right? When the game master was against the players and not as a game master.
In this case, they gave that player, the player had a voice-changing microphone. They had a bunch of buttons that in each room, they could trigger different noises and effects. And basically, because to get to that point, the team had to pick someone that bad thing was going to happen to. I'm going to be
Poor
not
guy.
spoilery here. And then that player dies in the game. So they go, the bad thing happens to them. They're gone. The game was a creepy game. It was so then that player was now the rest of the game. They were now on the side of the bad guy. So what's clever about that from a game design perspective is now you don't have to hire a staff member for that role. So if you're wanting a horror game where there's a live person who's causing grief to the players as they go through, and you actually make it one of the players that then does it, now you don't have to have a staff member who's doing that. You've given all those tools to one of the players, and that player is going to be able to do much more to their team to cause grief than a staff member would. So I thought from a staffing perspective, that was brilliant, because it's like, you get all the good stuff that happens when you have that dedicated actor who's going to be there as the bad guy, but now you're making that a player activity, and they're going to laugh and talk about that for a long time.
True.
Because that was, both sides got to have fun with that. So I thought that was a very smart move on the designers.
Yeah, it's a good solution for that type of alternative, because, for example, I played myself a horror game in Greece, in Athens.
Of course, it was in Athens.
And I remember that if you died, you could go to do that type of thing with a game master into the room. So you were still into the game if you wanted to be into the game from behind the cameras. So now we are going to jump into the second block, that is moving from theory to practice. Many designers around the world read your work to improve their creations, your papers. And I'd like to dive into the art of creating a great experience. So the next question is, if you had, Scott, to point out the most frequent mistake beginner designers make when creating an escape room, what will it be?
So I teach escape room design at the university. I've been teaching it for coming up on a decade now. And I always tell my students that your puzzles will be too hard. And that is the first thing I see in any designer, is the puzzles they make are too hard.
Myself included, by the way. Yeah.
It is. Oh, I tell them, if I'm going to say one thing about your game, I know the first puzzle you make will be too hard. And part of it is because in our minds, we understand the situation, we understand the puzzle, we understand what they're supposed to do, and we don't supply the player with enough information. We don't help them have the same mindset as we have. And as you have designed more and more puzzles, you understand context and the importance of providing context. Because when a player approaches a puzzle, anything in that space could have to do with the puzzle. And plus, if players don't have a lot of escape room experience, anything in the entire world could have to do with that puzzle. It's like, well, our president was born in 1912, so maybe it's 1912, and you're like, why would that be a clue?
Yeah, it is like no specific at all, right? It's like everything
totally
is possible. Yeah, everything is possible.
More experienced escape room players know that in a well-designed room, everything you need to solve the puzzle is going to be in that space. So that limits that space. But not all rooms are well-designed. And not all escape room owners know things like, I should remove any 4-digit numbers from anything I have in this room, because players are going to say, oh, the copyright year on this poster is 1984. I bet that's the so
yeah.
So that's the first thing, is recognize your puzzles are too hard and you can't test those puzzles with someone twice. That's what makes escape rooms difficult to design, is once one person has seen a puzzle, if you show it to them again, even if you've changed it, now they have context and you're not at the same spot that someone new to it. And along with that challenge happens that you test the puzzles independently, but then you put them in one shared space. And now that's creating a lot of information, and the players don't necessarily know. There's no reason they would know what information goes with what puzzle. And so all of a sudden, you've put stuff in that this looks like a clue. This one puzzle looks like a clue for this puzzle, and the players start putting them together. But the bigger concern, and like in my escape room class, I don't start teaching puzzle design until halfway through the class. We don't even talk about making puzzles until after the midterms of the class. So because we start with the narrative and the world. And that's the other big mistake I see, is when escape room designers start with puzzles. Because that's going to set up you having to create a narrative and a world that is more artificial or not at all connected to the puzzles. So the process that I say is to first think about your genre. Are you making a horror room? Are you making an espionage room? What's the general player experience you want to create? And then once you know that, you want to think about, well, what is the world? So is this past, present, future? Is this small scale, large scale? What's the time frame? Where is this stuff set? What's in the world? And then you want to think about who are the players and what's in their way of succeeding. So who are the players? What's their goal? And what's the obstacle?
So you need those things before starting creating the puzzles, so the puzzles will make sense. Yeah.
So the puzzles will make sense in the world. So you're going to use the stuff in the world as your affordances. That's a tool, a term we use to talk about all the stuff you could create your puzzles out of. So if I say the game is in a dentist's office, now there's a lot of affordances the dentist's office offers for puzzles. However, it's also full of things that would make no sense as to, well, yeah, you have to arrange the dental tools in a special way and it spells out a 4-digit code. Why? What is so that's the danger there. And that's why you need to come up with the story, the narrative. Who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? What are each trying to achieve? And what obstacles are in the way? And then your puzzles, either they convey the obstacles, so the puzzles are the obstacles in the way, using the affordances in the space, or the puzzles help you understand something about the good guy and what they can do. So puzzles can serve to train the player as to what sort of things they can accomplish. So then later on you can come back to it because of our self-determination theory competence, that you want players at the beginning to have puzzles that they might be challenged by, and they learn how to do that. They then use that knowledge later on for another puzzle, and then that builds their competence. They're self-determined. They feel much better about themselves because they learned something. Or the puzzles can help you understand something about the bad guy. So they can be things that help you learn about who he is or she is or who they are, what's going on there. And so those puzzles, each puzzle needs to have a role in your narrative, either helping you understand you and your skills, helping you understand your opposition and the challenges, or actually overcoming those obstacles. And all your puzzles are how you tell your story. It shouldn't be like a video game where you have a scene of shooting things in the face and then you have a cut scene.
Yeah.
And the cut scene is telling you the story, most people just press skip then and skip
to keep shooting.
Skip.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to shoot more people in the face. What is happening here? I don't care.
I don't care.
Do you have a face? I want to shoot it. And then I want to take the things you have. Well, do you need more? I don't need to know anything more. Can I shoot things in the face? Can I take their things? That's your that's your video game goal. And escape rooms typically are not about shooting things in the face, but they are about solving puzzles. But if the puzzles are conveying the narrative, then you don't have these cutscenes that players skip. They engage with the narrative because the puzzles are requiring that. That's part of the puzzle design. And so that's the big thing I would say is don't think about your puzzles first. Think about your world, your players, your enemies, the obstacles, and the narrative you want to tell. Then use the puzzles to move the players along that path of the narrative. That's the role of the puzzle, is to convey the narrative.
That sounds like a great idea. And in your experience, what do you think is the most overlooked aspect in the games you have seen so far?
Overlooked.
So me personally, I think it could be something like, for example, maybe sound design or the atmosphere with the lightning, but this is changing for the last years. But from your perspective, what would you think it is the most overlooked?
The ability to include everyone in what's going on.
Okay.
So, for example, escape rooms, they put a telephone in a room.
A
telephone in a room is horrible because only one person is going to be able to do anything. They make a puzzle and it's small. Only one person is going to be able to see that puzzle. So again, and there are ways to solve that. So to solve the telephone puzzle, you have it be a speakerphone so everyone can hear what's going on. Simple solution, but now you're involving the whole team. The funny story about that, I was playing a game, a Sherlock Holmes game in London that was based heavily on the television show Sherlock Holmes, of which I'd never watched. So there was a lot of references to the characters, and they had a phone, and they did the right thing with all the stuff on speakerphone. And you were hearing different characters on that speakerphone, and everyone could hear what was going on. So much better than just on the phone, everyone could hear. But because I don't know the show, all I heard was a bunch of British people yelling at me. And I didn't know who was whom because I didn't recognize voices. Thankfully, the people I was with on my team knew. It's like, oh, that's Watson, that's Sherlock Holmes, that's all I heard is like it's another British man yelling at me. And they said, yeah, that is kind of the show. It's a bunch of British people all yelling at each other. But so that's the challenge of the speakerphone, is make sure that the players have information so that they know what they're listening to. But taking anything that's small and making it big, taking anything that would be done by that only one person could observe or see, and make it so that everyone can be in on it. I'd say that's the biggest thing that I still see, even playing fancy rooms, the $1 million rooms. There's still moments where you're doing something that only one person can
enjoy. Yeah. And in fact, I'm checking back in time that most of the rooms have this problem. Yeah, most of them, because I have seen so many games where one player can carry on almost everything without the rest knowing exactly what's going on, or maybe just being observers and not enjoying the activity as it was supposed to be. And
you've all paid a lot of money for this activity.
Yeah.
So you really haven't paid a lot of money to watch one person do something fun. So if you're gonna have something fun in your room, make sure that it's something that everyone can engage with.
Yeah.
So it's not just one person getting to do the fun thing, but everyone gets to do the fun thing if you got something playful or fun in there.
Yeah, that's a very interesting reflection, and from your vision, that I think that has always been ahead of its time. Let's look now towards to the future of immersive entertainment. So where do you think the escape room and immersive experiences industry is heading right now?
So in general, we're seeing a slowdown. That's what I'm hearing is that in our current model of the mid-price recreational experience, it is a luxury activity. It's something that you are paying quite a bit of money for for an hour of activity, and it needs to pay off. It needs to be something where you come out of it and say, yeah, I feel like I got my money's worth. And that's where, as I mentioned a little earlier, I think the higher end, more theatrical experiences that feel like an immersive theater performance and are able to charge that price, but it's a special thing that you're going to get to do. So we see that alignment more with theater and those sort of theatrical experiences, with telling more stories, with actors involved, good actors involved.
Yeah. In Spain, games are emerging that are practically movies, and with huge investments that are hard to recoup. Do you think we are in a sector bubble somehow?
I think that there's going to be room for a few of those.
Okay.
This is not going to be like in the 17, 18, 19, where people could open up rooms on a low budget and there was enough space for a bunch of rooms that all didn't charge that much. People can't jump in on these big rooms. There's just not going to be the market to withstand that kind of thing. But I do think we have seen, so COVID created an interesting situation where a lot of the rooms that were created during that time that were just people jumping into it without the passion for the room, but just a budget for the room, that they shut down and they didn't reopen. So we did see a bit of that kind of disappearance of those lower quality rooms at that point. One thing I did like about the COVID time is that it created an emergence of new ideas, because people scrambled to explore, how do you do virtual rooms? And we saw a lot of really interesting formats of virtual rooms at that point. And I think coming out of that, some of that creativity continued, some of the lessons that we learned on, well, how do we push this? How do we explore different things? So I think and again, that long tail concept, that idea of tying those escape rooms into something else, into tourism, into training, into another industry that is doing well, is for an escape room owner. If I were an escape room owner, I would be looking for that. I'd be looking for, what other industry can I partner with such that it gives me something to bring in clients and bring in sales, that I'm not having to do all myself. So that's and the two that I see are through the informal learning spaces. So museums are the most likely candidate, and then through the training, the corporate nonprofit training spaces. I see those as the three directions this is going to go for things that continue. And then folks in the middle, again, there'll be space for some, but like we're seeing theater struggling a little bit. I think we're seeing those same kind of struggles.
Okay, so we are just running out of time, so I have to finish with a couple of personal reflections or questions. I want to know your personal feelings about, can Scott Nicholson still enjoy an escape room like a regular player, or is your analytical mind always working, deconstructing the experience in real time?
So one of the things that you hear is don't let your hobby become your job.
True.
And so I learned that the hard way. My first career was in computers, and I became and my hobby was also computers, building computers and that sort of thing. And I became a computer person at a university. I did IT type work, and I quickly found that doing that all day made it to where it was no longer something I could enjoy because it was my job. So I said, well, I'm not going to do that again. I went off and became a librarian. Well, let's fast forward 40 years here, where Scott is now game design professor, where now I have yet again let my hobby become my job. And I find that escape rooms, I am not able to lose myself in an escape room. Because I am tearing it apart analytically. I am, looking at it as the things I do enjoy about escape rooms now are, one, facilitating a good experience for the people on my team. So trying to make sure that whoever is there is doing the activity that they would enjoy doing. So if I see like if there's a logic puzzle and I know if someone on the team is good at that, I'm going to make sure that I bring that person over and say, hey, you want to work on this? Even though I could knock out a logic puzzle, I know that this person will enjoy it. So I will let
and you
them do
will
that.
give the experience to that person. Yeah.
So I enjoy doing that. I enjoy doing playful, silly things. You give me a ball pit in a room and I'm in there. I'm going to spend 20 minutes in that ball pit well beyond the time that I have to get out. I'm in that ball pit for the rest of the game.
Okay.
You give me a teeter-totter in a room, which I've had a few teeter-totters, and I'm teeter-tottering. You give me anything playful, and that is where I'm going to lose myself. I'm not going to necessarily be helping the team win at that point. But I am going to be having fun. And that's the time when I can lose myself, when I don't need to worry about succeeding. I can just play. And that's the
spirit of Escape Rooms. Yeah.
I made a game all about that concept. That was a game designed to fail. And so it was a sort of a small, more of an indie LARP type thing based on escape room concepts. And each player was given a little information about a play activity that they like to do. And if they're presented with that, they're just going to do that. And the concept was that each puzzle then kind of knocked one player out at a time, who then got to do this fun thing for the rest of the game while the players were still doing puzzles. And it was about a bourgeoisie breakout. And it was the idea that you wanted to become a member of the leisure class. You didn't want to work anymore. And so to do that, you were going to have to release yourself from succeeding at the game. So you were going, to win the game, you basically had to fail at the game of solving the clues, because you were going to immerse yourself in the playful activities I was providing you with, and the time would run out and you didn't care because you were doing a fun thing. And that was the game I made to explore that concept of play as compared to games. The board games behind me, again, same problem. I put down a board game and I get stuck in the analytical side of it. With the exception of board games that came out before I started being a YouTuber. So things that came out that I learned and played fully recreationally, I can still pull off the shelf and enjoy. Things that came out after that point, when I was analyzing it to teach it, to design it, things like that, I can't enjoy in the same way. So older classic Euro games I can enjoy because I'm not thinking analytically about them, because I'm in that different mindset. But so that's actually why I play a lot of digital games, because I'm not making digital games. I can play them to just enjoy them. And, and that's where I do most of my game enjoyment now, is in the video game space.
Okay. So would you recommend me any video game?
It depends upon what kind of things you like. Whether you want to
strategy, RPG, logical, puzzles.
I mean, because the one I've put the most time in very recently is Soulstone Survivors, which is off the Vampire Survivors concept. And so it's a grinding, mindless. So one of my favorite video games was Gauntlet. Arcade game
Gauntlet.
Gauntlet arcade game. So top-down shooter where you're moving with one stick and shooting with the other. And I've loved to see that kind of game has continued. We've seen the twin stick shooter type game has continued to come up. And then the Vampire Survivors model, where you don't even need to shoot. You just move and make clever decisions about what weapons you have, and the game automatically shoots for you. I'm like, this is great as I'm getting to be an old man and I'm not as good at reactions. All I got to do is like one stick. I move around. This is fantastic. So I have found that, I've gotten into some of the deeper games, and I played Baldur's Gate and played through all of that and played through these story-based things. But a lot of times I'm just looking to a video game to turn brain off for a little while.
Relax and just enjoy, right?
I played a lot of Diablo. I played a lot of those sorts of things because I just am looking to shut the brain off for a little bit, as compared to something where I'm really getting in, I'm really thinking about everything. So many of the big thinky games I play for a little bit and I'm like, well, this is my day job. Is there a face? Can I shoot a face? Will it drop a thing? Can I shoot a face and drop a thing? And numbers go up, bigger numbers, better player. Yeah. So yeah, when I just need to shut off, I go for that. If I'm going to, otherwise board games through Board Game Arena or escape rooms, what's more important to me is who I'm playing with instead of the game I'm playing.
Okay.
I use it as a way to engage with other people, and that's what I'm looking to have. I don't like playing board games asynchronously against random strangers, because at that point it's just like playing with a slow AI. I want to play with a chat. I want to have an engagement, and I'm more interested in talking to you about your day and your life, and the game is something we're doing as that's going along. That's why I play games, is for the people I'm playing them with.
Okay. So there's a chain question that in every chapter in the podcast we made to the next guest. So this question comes from the guy we interviewed in the previous episode. So which escape room are you dying to play?
Let's see. There is
it can be in Spain, by the way.
Anything.
Anything worldwide. Which escape room are you dying to play right now?
The Dome.
The Dome. Okay. Very famous one.
I have heard amazing things about it, and no spoilers other than it's an amazing game. And so that is probably my number one. If I could get a plane ticket to go play one escape room, it would be to go and experience the Dome.
Okay, I haven't played that game, but I'm as enthusiastic as you are for it, because it is in my top 5 list right now. So,
what's your list?
My list will be Una Aventura de Leyenda. That is a game in Maito Kingdom here in the north of Spain that I will be playing in October. It's another game that it's called Tú también flotarás, tú también soñarás, that I don't know if you recognize the name, but it is a scary game based upon It, the film movie about the clown and everything. That is the same company here in the north of Spain. They are like a reference because they have been in the top Terpecas. The Dome, Chapel and Catacombs in Athens, and the new game that is going to open in Canada, I think it is, the Circus or something like that.
I've actually played that one, Magnifico Circus.
Oh, Magnificus Circus, that's the name.
Yeah.
Okay, so how was it? Magnificus.
So here was my... so I hadn't played a lot of escape rooms over COVID, and we made a big trip to Montreal and Quebec City.
Yeah.
We played 18 rooms in 4 days, and many of them were at Escaparium. So we did Magnifico Circus and the Cathedral and Wardrobe for Sale and a lot of these big ones. And what I came away, my overall feeling about those games and their Terpeca ratings is that I didn't come away saying that the stories were any better than a small escape room could tell, that their puzzles weren't any more clever than a small escape room could create, but they had 100 times the budget of small escape rooms.
Okay. 100 times. Okay.
I came away feeling really a bit heartbroken for small escape rooms and the Terpeca, and the way the Terpeca really awards. Now, the Terpeca games still have to have a good story, and they still have to have engaging puzzles. But there is no way
for a small
budget escape room could compete for these awards because of the way the awards are done. And I thought, well, would there be a way to award small budget rooms?
Yeah, independent projects. Yeah.
Or a way to have it where it's only on, say, puzzle design or best narrative design or best puzzle design, not stripping out the special effects. Because the rooms, and I mean, a 2.5 hour game with 3 actors.
Yeah.
And
you can't compete with that.
Are lifelike in a circus setting. How can mom and pop game ever compete with that, assuming that they both have the ability to write an engaging story, they both have the ability to create engaging puzzles? There's no way they can compete. So I came away feeling kind of bad about the situation for the smaller, because some of my favorite escape room experiences are the small independent escape rooms where I'm playing with the designer who's put their heart and soul into making this room. And there's a really nice story. There's interesting puzzles that convey that story, but they don't have the budget to make these over-the-top lavish experiences, so they're never going to make this particular blockbuster type list. And so I guess I came away saying they're fine. The stories are good. The puzzles are fine. I did like that all of the Escaparium rooms had a game master with you in some way and engaged with you. But it was like, well, this is what you can get if you have a big budget to throw at the room, along with the fine story and the well-designed puzzles. But the small guys can do just as well with their stories and puzzles without the big budgets.
Okay. So that will move us to the last part. That is, what question will you ask to our next guest for the next episode?
The next guest, I will ask them, what is an activity that would be offered to you in an escape room that you would fail the escape room in order to continue doing that activity?
Okay, that's very interesting.
So for me, it was like the ball pit. You put a ball pit in a room, I'm done. I'm in that ball pit. I'm not coming
forever.
Out. I don't care. They'll have to come and drag me out of that ball pit. You give me something playful and fun, and it's like I'm playing. You guys have fun. I'm gonna
I will be there for the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's like in some of the haunted escape rooms have those big cushion things that squish you in place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just gonna hang out here. This is nice. It's cozy. You guys go on. I'm
keep
just
going,
gonna,
guys.
I'm just gonna bliss out here and just hang out. So yeah, find out from your next guest what activity in a room, and maybe it's a bottle of scotch. There's been a joke about that. It's like, what's your escape room? Well, it's called the bookstore. Okay, so what's the game? It's just a bookstore, and you have to leave in an hour to win.
Okay,
and that's it. So some people will lose that game.
Okay,
it's like a bookstore. You've got all the coffee, a comfy chair, a cat if that's what you need, and
try to figure out how to exit in 1 hour, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Scott Nicholson, it has been a true privilege to have you here on La Clave Maestra. You have given us a masterclass that I'm sure our listeners will value greatly. For everyone who wants to dive deeper into your work, we will recommend visiting scottnicholson.com, Scott as it sounds, Nicholson, and following your profile in your social media. And I don't know if you want to say a last thing before we say goodbye to our listeners.
I'd say take some people to an escape room that have never been and let them be the heroes.
Oh, that's great. I will start doing the same, I think. So thank you so much, Scott, for your time. And I think Danny wants to say bye-bye from the... He was all the time in the desk.
A lot of thanks. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for inviting. Gracias por invitarle.
You're welcome.
So it has been a pleasure. Really, really thank you for your time, Scott. And I'm sorry that it took us an hour, but I think it is a very, very good episode. And I know that there's a very good group of people that will enjoy watching this. Because I've been talking about your work for many years to many people, and I think that this activity, it has a long time ahead. So I don't know if I explained myself correctly, but I think this is just the beginning of a new type of entertainment, right?
I think we'll see other stuff, just like escape rooms came out of other things.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we are seeing other things come out of escape rooms. We're seeing advances in theme park design and theme park games because people are now more comfortable with puzzle-based and more immersive type. People are coming with a bit more of an expectation because of escape rooms into, say, interactive theme park experiences. We've seen advances in theater and immersive theater. We're seeing museums figure out
museums will change forever. That's true.
We're seeing we are seeing how they're taking individual exhibits and adding more interaction based on the way escape rooms draw people in. So just like live action role playing and adventure game shows led into escape rooms are going to leading into these other kinds of activities.
Okay, so thank you so much, and I hope you have good luck moving into your new place, and have a great time. I hope we talk some time in the future again. And maybe if I go to Canada, I will try to contact you. And if I have the chance, I will come back. Welcome by visiting you and knowing you personally. It will be an honor.
If you do visit Canada and you want to do some of the rooms, there's a lot of rooms in Toronto I have not done. that came up during COVID in the last 5 years. So
Okay.
there's actually a lot of rooms there that I haven't played. So if you come that way, let me know. You could do, so it would be not too hard to do both the Montreal rooms and the Toronto rooms.
That sounds like a good deal. Yeah.
Train between them. Yeah.
That's great. So thank you so much, Scott, and have a wonderful day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.